Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Africa Travel Week 2021. Africa Travel Week is the nexus for travel professionals across South Africa, the continent, and the globe. Africa Travel Week plays host to various shows, conferences, and award ceremonies focusing on leisure tourism, luxury travel, LGBTQ++ travel, MICE and business travel, sport tourism, as well as travel technology. And today on Africa Travel Week 2021, we are going to be speaking to some prominent South Africans within the South African travel space about what we have learned from the pandemic. Excuse me. On our panel today, we have Mr. Opapilane, who is the co-founder and director at Graskop Gorge Lift Company and the vice chairman of SATSA. We also have Ms. Cindy Sheedy Walker, who is the Director of Extraordinary Marketing Concepts, as well as Tiens Vivian, who is the Head of the Tourism Destination Development for the City of Cape Town. I would like the panelists, and they're all on, you can see their lovely faces. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for making the time to join us for this discussion, which is a very important one where we are at right now within the tourism industry. So I would like, hello. I would like us to actually just take a moment. It's been a year since South Africa itself has started feeling the effects of COVID-19 and since we went into the first lockdown. But I want to think back to a time before. I mean, I was saying to Cindy, I was saying to Cindy earlier on that just a couple of weeks before the lockdown, I was on the Chobe and stamping through Namibia and Botswana and Zambia and Zimbabwe without a thought that couldn't be possible in a few months' time. And I just think back to when the pandemic hit Italy the worst, and these beautiful travel photos were coming out of Italy and Venice, and it was pictures that we had never seen before, pictures of clean, clear, quiet streets, empty canals, which was unheard of in the history of travel in these beautiful and always busy destinations. And, when we think about things like that, we think about what the tourism industry was like and the challenges that it faced before that. And Cindy, I would like for you to open up the discussion and just go back with me to that, and just looking at what are the challenges, that the tourism industry faced that the pandemic has actually taught us to overcome.
Wow, so many learnings. Thank you, Mandisa, for that one. So many learnings over the past 12 months. It seems, in fact, much longer than 12 months that have passed. I was packing my bag, heading for Italy, in fact, on the 26th of February, and decided to curtail my trip at the last minute. Fortunately, we were from Italy planning on going through to ITB, which is, I haven't missed an ITB in 22 years. So it was strange not to be going. Some of our colleagues had already traveled out to the show. And I think the idea that something so drastic and something so big was coming was inconceivable to any of us. Some of our colleagues still flew out afterwards, thinking that things would continue the way that had been planned. Diaries still open, meetings still being scheduled, etc. So I think the shock of the initial announcement and the lockdown that was announced just after that was huge.
Absolutely, Cindy. And when you think about that, and what we were faced with at the time, what can you say are some of the key things that you learned, as within your company, to that, to face the pandemic and overcome it, to help yourself as well as your clients?
So the initial reaction obviously was dealing with clients who were in the country, clients who were traveling imminently, and it became an entire focus. In fact, we worked harder than I think we've ever worked before in rebooking, cancelling, assisting stranded passengers in South Africa at the time. So there were a great deal of things that have changed since then, and that we've actually noticed where we could make huge differences going forward, utilizing some of those learnings from that we've learned over the last 12 months. We were sort of in a phase of mass tourism. Many companies, South Africa's tourism was increasing. It was, we were seeing more and more arrivals coming to our shores, which was fantastic, but very much focused on pricing, trying to make the destination as affordable as possible to as many as possible. And I think what we're going to see going forward, or what we're already seeing, is less. It's just smaller numbers, etc. The other thing that we have obviously had to pivot across to very, very quickly once once the lockdown was lifted and travel, specifically interprovincial travel, was permitted again, was that we had to look locally, we had to look internally. Now, our company has always been very well positioned in the South African market, but suddenly we are reliant on a market that is entirely local. And that has been very interesting, because when strategies have had to be updated and re-looked at, suddenly we're talking to direct consumers. We're not only dealing with agents and tour operators. So the way in which we operate has entirely shifted in the past 12 months.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Cindy. Opa, I would love to hear from your company being an experiential one. So what it is that you had to do in order to better accommodate the local market, because for a time, and probably still for a time to come, that is the main source market for tourism in South Africa. So how did the Graskop Gorge Lift Company adapt to accommodate just the local market?
Yeah, no, look, what I'm saying is that it's been a very, very difficult time. And we've been really learning on the go. We couldn't have a formula at first that we could use, but finally we decided that as an attraction, it becomes more important that we locate ourselves within the route. So instead of just creating interest on the product itself, we created interest on the entire route and shown people as we were creating interest. We had to develop a content that showcases some of the attractions along the route. And that we've seen it working. And then our social media platform, we then create entire route. And that Facebook page will then allow product owners to come in and sell their products, but also it will allow the end user to inquire and also allow the end user to share their experiences. So we basically encourage them to say that, please, if you travel to a particular attraction along this route, share your pictures, share your experience. And that on its own really kickstart that entire interest, because it was not now about us as product owners trying to sell to people, hard selling to people, but it was us interacting as one group, as common stakeholders where people were saying, we've been locked down and we didn't know that this route has got so much to offer. And also they now coming in as active participant, not only just as buyers of products, but as active participants that are now taking pride of their area, of their country, and showcasing it to the world and sharing it not only on our social media platforms, but on their social media platform. And I think that has been one of the greatest lessons that we've learned so far.
Absolutely. Locals always make the best ambassadors. If your locals enjoy the product and they come and they share with it, they create the vibe. Absolutely. It's always said or often said, you know, when looking at the domestic market, it's not as lucrative as international travelers. You know, you can't necessarily charge euros and dollars. How did you adjust to the change in consumer spending now with this source market?
Look, I think for us, what we've done is that one of the things that we've realized is that as an attraction, honestly, in terms of our pricing structure, we really didn't do much. We still maintained our pricing structure, but we do have certain specials that we run along the route. But what we've done is that we've encouraged tour operators to come in. We've encouraged accommodation providers to come in and offer package deals, which are discountable, and also coming on board in terms of also discounting some of our offerings. And that we've seen it working, because people are really not interested only in your in your activity, but they're interested in a turnkey solution that you provide them, and at a much discounted price. So that has basically worked for us in that route.
That's fantastic, Raoba. Thank you. And I think, you know, collaboration is really something that has come out strong from, you know, what I've seen, and I know what many of us have seen within the tourism industry. We've seen, you know, the private sector collaborating more with the private sector in order to get over the challenges. And I really hope that that is something that destinations and individual products will do going forward. Just collaborate more and put the destination first. And I'm sure Tiens has firsthand experience as the head of destination development for the city of Cape Town. Tiens, what can you share with us about how the city of Cape Town had to adjust and what you had to do during this pandemic?
Yeah, Mandisa, it was a challenging time. May I remind you that if you turn back the clock, and I still struggle to turn back the clock, because whenever people ask me, you know, when did you do this? I'll say last year, meaning 2019. It's as if 2020 did not exist. But there was a 2018 that existed for us, which was a drought. We battled with water supply in Cape Town, and we were just coming out of that handsomely. What we learned from that experience was that you rely on the local population. Those were the people that consumed the most water, and they heeded the calls from local government to say, if you don't stop, we will run out of water. So reduce your consumption, and we learned very important lessons. When COVID struck, we were on the up, more increased direct flights to Cape Town, handsomely climbing, figures climbing, 20% growth in certain months year on year. So we were really chuffed where we were going. And then COVID struck. And again, it was in the hands of the local population on saying, how are you going to react to national and international directives? National government makes a decision to lock down. We all adhere to it or we don't. So how do you react? And for us, it was important to get the message out to our citizens to say, for tourism to thrive, we need to have destination confidence built up in international markets. They must feel confident that we can deal with the pandemic, that we can deal with a crisis like the water crisis, and for them as tourists to come here and feel comfortable in the destination. So that was a key learning for us, that we had a bit of a trial run in 2018 and then had to reapply in 2020. But the biggest learning for us collectively was that we intertwined into a worldwide network. It's not South Africa on an island. It's not a few source countries that feed you. It is a whole worldwide network of people that create perception, but also share realities. And those are the things that alter demand. It can increase it, but it can also stifle demand. And what was quite worrisome was that at some point early in 2020, we relied on the domestic market, which was all hunky-dory, and we saw a lot of people travel within South Africa, then within the provinces, and tourism survived in a way. But those are the companies that were geared for the local market, and not everybody was in that market. So many companies closed down with the hope of opening up again after 3 or 6 months. And we never knew that this was going to be a long-term lockdown in inverted commas. It's not lockdown, but if there's no tourists, then it is a lockdown. So we battled through that, and it was the changing expectations over time. Was like, we can still keep on our staff for 3 months or maybe 6 months, but definitely not 9 months. Now we are a year down the line, and companies are really feeling the pinch. In Cape Town, we've lost about 100,000 jobs in tourism, but also in other sectors. But we are very fortunate that we've created a lot of investment during the end of 2019 and 2020 in Cape Town, about 11.5 billion rand of investment in different sectors, and that created jobs. So we were very fortunate that the losses due to COVID was offset in some cases by the growth in other sectors. So we had a lot to learn of changing the tourism offering. We also had to learn to go online and go online fast. And the main thing that we claimed right in the beginning of the pandemic was to be a reliable information source. If people wanted to know what's happening in Cape Town, what are the medical alerts, they could go to our agency, Cape Town Tourism's website, and get that information, and also at the city. And we prided ourselves on providing accurate and timeous information so that tourists who were still in the country and those who intended coming to Cape Town could make an informed decision. But it's the collective that made it work for us. We are all in the same challenging environment at the moment, and we rely on your locals to adhere to national policies and regulations, and in that way instill destination confidence with our international tourists.
Absolutely. I think that's amazing. And our locals are the best custodians of our national assets, which we rely on, for tourism to continue thriving in South Africa and to revive. I'd love to know, Tiens, what are some of the technological solutions that City of Cape Town looked to or will be looking to in the future? Because one thing that we know, this new normal is not really going to change, and the digital side of tourism is we really need to catch up in South Africa. And I think Cape Town leads the country in a lot of aspects, as in connecting us to the global community. So what are some of the digital solutions you're looking at as the tourism authority in Cape Town?
Well, our biggest hope is, of course, on vaccination, is that there's a good rollout worldwide that will enable people to travel. And then the question is, how do you process that? The e-visa will be a fantastic solution to that challenge that we have at the moment, where people can easily have access to the country, not just to Cape Town, but to the whole of South Africa. And then the other thing is we need to displace this connection to the South African variant of the virus, because it's coupled to our name. And we need to actively engage with embassies, with ambassadors, to say, your travel advisories are really causing problems for us. Let's reconsider the situation. Look at the facts in South Africa. Is it safe to travel? And based on that and that alone, you make a directive or recommendation for people to travel. So we are actively engaging in communications. We feel it's the first barrier that we need to cross. We have a broad plan to say to Cape Town is to, if you come to Cape Town, you come here to visit, to play, to work, to stay, to educate, or to invest. And we have a six-pronged communications plan to say different markets will require different interventions. And we're going to speak to different markets through our communications plan. And then we have a bounce back plan, a bounce back marketing plan, where we say, in the past, we would have gone after the traditional markets, which are very good markets, and they normally bounce back very quickly. If you're old enough, you'll remember we had a Planet Hollywood bomb explosion in Cape Town many years ago, and the market was very resilient, and we bounced back very quickly. And we assume the same will happen again if we instill destination confidence in South Africa and in Cape Town. But the bottom line is that our technology will have to be up to scratch to screen people, to monitor people, and to intervene also in terms of the supply chain. Imagine and I don't want to use a specific mode, but people arrive on our shores. They are then screened, declared fit for travel, then handed over to a tour operator. The tour operator, 2 days into the travel, discover that most of the tourists are infected. Who is liable for that? Where does the buck stop? And many of the small guys are saying, I can't carry that cost of transporting people back to a main city where they need to be hospitalized and so forth. So how do we share that? And I think that lesson is still to be learned, is to say, how can we make it better for everybody in the supply chain? We hope that by registering as many as possible tourism entities within Cape Town, we can have a better handle on what the numbers are and what we need to do to make that happen. We're also thinking of applications for a new mobile service when you arrive in Cape Town, that you receive notifications, push notification to your phone to say, welcome to the destination. These are the do's and don'ts. And most importantly, safety and security, which has always been branded as one of the top negative items of traveling to South Africa, has now got a new connotation to it. When we spoke safety in the past, it was about crime-related issues. Now safety is about public health. So how do we address that through technology before people make the decision to travel, and when they arrive, that it's instilled in them that these are the things that we adhere to, mainly subscribe to the World Health Organization's requirements, but also adapting to local circumstances. And it's all about communication.
Absolutely. You know, Cindy said something earlier on that how we react, especially travel companies and travel agencies and product hotels, how we have reacted to the our clients' challenges during this is the way that we're going to be remembered forever. It makes it, it creates an impression. So Tiens, I really like that, and I really hope that we can communicate not just amongst ourselves as the tourism industry, but with other sectors of government, other sectors of industry, so that we can get these solutions going forward. We learned, it left such a good impression on me, how private sector and public sector, I think for the first time properly, actually came together and really discussed solutions. It wasn't always pretty. It didn't always move swiftly forward, but it was happening. And it showed a good example of what can be achieved when we are all putting our heads together. And I think we definitely need to carry that out into the future, and have a comprehensive consultative process when it comes to moving things along and getting solutions, like you're saying, what technological solutions can be in place in order to make sure that the visitor experience is swift and visitors are reassured of what the actualities are on the ground, because that is what will shape the experience, and that is what will shape the perception of South Africa. Cindy, I would love for you to weigh in just on that, as as a company that deals with direct clients, luckily you're one of the companies that Tien's mentioned, you know, who were already positioned well to work within the domestic market, but still facing the same issues. What did you have to do when it came to the cancellations, the rebooking, the assurance of credit, insurance, all of that you had to change and you think will need to stay the same or improve going forward?
I think that the terms and conditions and the policies that govern travel will be a moving target. I think that we will constantly be reassessing. You may see new trends emerging with 3 to 6 month agreements as opposed to 12-month agreements, etc., whilst we wait and see and try to gauge what our market will be doing. The international market certainly wants to be certain that should they book, that they are protected in case of contracting COVID, in case of lockdowns, in case of airlines pulling out of a destination. So we have to give them those reassurances. I think demonstrating flexibility as much as possible is the key. And the country as a whole, certainly our tourism industry, is extremely flexible. We have the ability to pivot our agreements quite quickly. And I think that we will certainly see that continuing, certainly for the next 18 months, at least going forward. I think it's very important that that message of safety and security is part of whatever agreements we have out there, but also to manage the balance very carefully between messaging entirely from a safety and security perspective as a marketing message, or simply assuming that the trade and the guests want to know the detail of the protocols, etc., that is in place. So being covered by protocols is one thing, but to utilize that as a marketing initiative may not necessarily always be the way to go. It could be counterproductive. So we've got to always balance that marketing view and that experience, and always ensuring that the experience is more important than the protocols out there. And I think it's so difficult to find that balance at times, because we all want to reassure our customers that they are going to be safe and healthy at our properties, that we sometimes could forget that they're actually coming for the experience that we're actually there to offer them.
Absolutely. And you know, they always say word of mouth is the best kind of marketing, and Raopa alluded to earlier on that when guests, South Africans, started sharing their experiences at the gorge, other South Africans actually saw what the experience was all about, what the route was all about, and perhaps that's the balance. I certainly believe in personal stories. I believe that stories do a much better job of selling an experience than some marketing tick off list. I suppose it's also marketing. So Raopa, I would love to come to you in terms of just striking that balance between reassuring a customer and enticing a customer. Where have you managed? Are you still getting there? How have you been dealing with that?
Look, I think the challenge is, and it is important we communicate and make our customers understand that we are operating under not normal situations. You know, number one, you would know most of our establishments, number of staff that they are used to be operating with, it's important that as an establishment now, that needs to be made and explained to customers as they come into that. Sometimes they may experience delays, not because we are sluggish, but because practical challenges that we are to make sure that they are overshadowed by this protocol for our establishment. And I think we've been able to balance difficult as it may be sometimes from us, but we try to move, sometimes go beyond what we could probably do under normal circumstances to make sure that even when the customer is not happy, we go an extra mile to make sure that they are happy and that they can be able to come back. And look, I'm happy because most of the feedback, our customers will say, yes, we've had some bad experience, but management went further, beyond the normal call of duty to make sure that we've got this experience. So unfortunately, these are the added things that we've got to do because, as I say, that we are operating under abnormal circumstances. So at some point, when we have exceeded the number of people that must come into these facilities, we have to close the gate, to maintain social distancing. So you basically have to close the gate to maintain social distancing. It makes some of these customers unhappy, but if you explain to them that it is for their experience and it's for their safety, they do understand that. And this is the constant communication that we have to engage in. So now our communication between ourselves as an establishment and our customers is no longer a once-off thing, but a constant engagement in terms of making them understand and what to expect when they come into the establishments. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Praopa. We lost you there a little bit, but I love the point that you raised, that it is what happens on property, what happens when you are with the guest and you're giving them that physical experience is exactly what is going to carry through on social media. That is what people are going to share. And if we manage those expectations, like I was in Coffee Bay last week, and before I left, I was advised by the property, you just make sure that you leave Gqeberha at this certain time because you're going to hit a really bad road with potholes when you get to Mkanduli, and that's going to be for about an hour. If I hadn't had that warning, I would have left late. I would have probably lost a tire, and I would have probably been very mad when I got to the property. And we've always had to do that within tourism, working with people. And really that is something that is carrying us through this time, Praopa, especially when it comes to the protocols and like at this establishment, right? Today I am at the Boardwalk Sun and in Gqeberha, and really just having the experience, knowing the kind of experience I'm used to enjoying at this hotel, but having my COVID hat on, knowing, right, things are not going to be as I'm used to, because we're trying to adhere to protocols, and it's just about educating the clients. So really, absolutely agree. We've been covering operational processes, marketing. I'd really love us to go into how we move on as a destination, as South Africa, as Africa. When we look at some of the issues that Tien's brought forward about, how do we get over, how do we manage this visa process? How do we manage the communication? How do we reinstill destination confidence? As South Africa, as SADC, as Africa first, I always think and believe, and in looking at how we can actually start rebuilding as a destination. Tiens, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, thanks. There are two issues I'd like to raise. One is that the domestic market can only do so much. We are in a depressed economy and people have very limited disposable income. We saw initially that people went on short breaks, which is another thing that it's not accounted for in tourism because it's not pure tourism. But short breaks, in many cases, the day visitor are keeping small businesses afloat by buying something from them for the day, being a day visitor, exploring a destination, but still sleeping at home. So there's a small market that I think we've missed a little bit, and we can sharpen our marketing and focusing skills on them. But to rely solely on the domestic market would be wrong, because for the reasons I've mentioned. And I think we need to look at how quickly can we bounce back in terms of international travel. Now, there are options in terms of pairing with certain cities or certain destinations, and say if they find the measures in Cape Town in South Africa acceptable and vice versa, that why can't passengers then travel between those destinations? I think we need to pursue those kind of options. And then the positive thing that I'd like to put on the table, because there's a lot of doom and gloom, and we see it, and businesses are closing down and people are losing their livelihoods and their jobs, is there's a lot of pent-up demand. I'm fortunate to sit on one of the cruise line committees, and the cruise companies indicated, some of them, that their 2022-23 world cruises are already fully sold out. So there is a silver lining around this very dark cloud. And I think we need to focus on those positives of how do we stay top of mind. And Cape Town has a specific strategy that we roll out to do that. And you'll see in the media, and I'll say it as modest as I can, that we've won, even during lockdown, we've won some accolades as Table Mountain being the best attraction in Africa, Cape Town, the party city, Cape Town International Airport, the airport in Africa. So we're continuing to punt that, to say we are still here, we still are of a very high standard, and as soon as it's acceptable to travel both ways, we are ready to go. And I think that's the message we need to carry.
Absolutely, Tiens. I actually want to zoom in on what you mentioned earlier about, are there particular cities that could perhaps form some agreements and start opening up travel between those cities? Are there certain countries? I think definitely these sort of bilateral agreements can really go a long way to kick off travel. Cindy, do you have any thoughts on there as to, how we could potentially do this, and maybe you have some ideas for the government as to which countries we should pair up with?
So I think that going forward, it's definitely going to become more important than ever for us to accept the fact that there's got to be these bilateral agreements that will enable travel between the different countries. So bringing on board all the different departments, not only of tourism, but also of health, foreign affairs, security, etc., that all have to play a part and become intertwined to ensure that those decisions and those enabling factors are in place for travel to commence. Definitely, I think departments like DIRCO, etc., are so important right now. And sitting down, as you suggested earlier on, with the various embassies, etc., and discussing those travel notices that are on their websites, etc., and really looking at the current statistics and the current downward trend of numbers, etc., is so incredibly important, because it's always a moving target. So I think getting that communication going on a regular basis is so very important, that we can ensure that we can open up, because isolation is never going to be the answer. I think working closer to home in an initial stage with ensuring that easy access and easy travel between the SADC countries to start off with is enabled between ourselves and Botswana and Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, etc., would be so important. The couple of international visitors that we are securing and that we are loving their arrivals at our shores are hampered by the fact that they, within a 6-day itinerary, which includes perhaps 2 other countries, neighboring countries, have to have 3 separate PCR tests, which is extremely costly and not not a great experience. But if there was any way where we could create travel bubbles, even amongst our SADC and neighbors, it would be so useful to attract those countries. We're seeing pent-up demand is such a big thing right now. I was fortunate to spend 2 weeks on a virtual travel platform, and out of the USA, huge demand, out of the UK, huge interest. As soon as everybody is able, I do believe that the recovery can be extremely swift. So I agree with Chance there totally, that we have so much opportunity, and yes, let's stay positive, let's look on the bright side, and definitely, I think engaging between the public, the private sector, government, non-government organizations is so important. That engagement that Opa spoke about with customers, I think the industry, the continued industry engagement is just the answer to the future, and recovery being a regional effort as well.
Absolutely. And I love how that opens us up, because, you know, we've always seen the domestic market as just South Africa, and COVID actually forced us more to just see it as just South Africa. But potentially going forward, one thing that collaboration and these sort of agreements within SADC could do is actually open us up to a wider, domestic market, and including our neighboring countries. So yes, we can share visitors, but we also want to really start getting travelers from the SADC region, from the rest of Africa coming in, and not just relying on external. And when I say external, is, you know, other continents, not only relying on those external source markets. Braoba, just from last thoughts, please do share your closing remarks with us. But as part of that, I'd really like to ask, what has your experience been within, you know, having visitors? Have you seen visitors from the SADC countries in this time? What do you think can be done to actually start opening up that African market more, and for us to start working in unison?
I think our experience is, you would know that, especially in Mpumalanga, our biggest African source market is Mozambique and Swaziland. You know, and fortunately, they also form part of the top 10 African markets in the country. You know, so our observation was that very little was done in marketing our products in Swaziland and in Mozambique. You know, we basically didn't, honestly speaking, didn't do anything, you know, to market our products in Mozambique and Swaziland, being our biggest source market. So we just were happy with that. These markets automatically come for shopping, and whilst they are coming for shopping, and then they will eventually find themselves doing something, you know, because we were spoiled by the international foreign markets, in the UK markets and everything. So we were spoiled by them. And right now we realize that actually, you know, these are our bread and butter markets, which they need to know what we have as a country and what we have as a province. So now we have, as association, also industry association, is that we are now beginning to strengthen communications amongst ourselves, because that becomes key. You know, we often see a lot of communication between government to government, and government goes and sign a protocol agreements on economic interaction, but you don't see us following up on those agreements, because in essence, it is us that must bring those agreements into life. You know, government is not going to bring those agreements into life. So we are now beginning to harvest on those agreements, and also say to government, as with our marketing authorities, let's focus, let's go and interact, let's go and establish some networks in our SADC countries more seriously than we did before. So that's basically what is now happening. Not only that, but also we are beginning to say, as provinces, you know, neighboring provinces, you know, if you look at, we are connected with Limpopo, we are connected with Gauteng. we are, whether you like it or not, we are connected with KZN in terms of our proximity. But there hasn't been industry to industry really interactions amongst ourselves. And this is basically saying to us now, we need to speak more. We need to be able to expose each other more in terms of what we can offer and what we can do as industry. So it is really, really, really important that we now must have a SADC focus in terms of our marketing. So we really, really, really need to up our game and make sure that our SADC people understand what we as South Africa has to offer, and vis-a-vis what they have to offer. And that becomes very, very, very important, because if we don't do that, the issues of safety and security becomes a challenge. The issues of xenophobia becomes a challenge, because we are not interacting as a people. We've created walls amongst these artificial borders that we have. So the more people begin to experience each other's countries, it not only goes, it goes beyond leisure or tourism, but it also goes to social interaction, to dealing with issues of cultural interactions and understanding each other as African people, and to realize that we are all connected by an umbilical cord. And therefore, that becomes very, very important, that we need, as an industry association across the country, to begin to deal partners. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Praopa. That is so true. And, one thing that I know that will solve is the issue we've been dealing with for years of, just geographical spread within South Africa. If we can see provincial authorities start to collaborate more and start spreading the love, and we would definitely open up more of South Africa and make the pie quite larger. Cindy, over to you for some final thoughts.
Wow. I think it's a global issue. I think understanding that this phenomenon is global, and that every country, every human is being affected here, and that the reality is now being shaped by population and scale and technology and unique challenges, and how to move forward with sustainably managing our tourism product that we have to offer, and ensuring that that we can look at multiple markets like we've discussed here, that we are in a position whereby we know in the future it's very likely that we're going to have markets switching on and switching off. So we need to have a robust market available to our country from multiple sources, be it SADC, be it Africa, be it a number of international markets that we will be able to draw on as and when they open, etc. Because we know that this phenomenon is not suddenly just going to disappear entirely. I think we need to utilize the opportunities that we've got out there, seeing what it's the difference between the previous potentially over tourism and where it's connected to managing this current problem. So trying to utilize those learnings with regards to urban planning and building and design and crowd management and tourism flows, policies, etc., and how we can utilize what we've learned going forward so that we can prepare ourselves as much as possible for future events and challenges that may come our way. I'd hate to think that in 2 or 3 years' time something else could come along and we would have moved on from this crisis and not utilized these learnings that we actually have had in the last while. What I've loved most about this experience, and there's very little I've loved, but this I've certainly loved, has been the warmth and the collaboration that has happened in our industry, where we've actually seen all the different forces working together, interprovincials talking, and that has been really, really positive for me. So I look forward to growing with that and hoping that there will be a stronger future in tourism in South Africa. And it may change. Tourism may become more expensive because you may have much less as far as the numbers go. So obviously prices would rise accordingly. And I think that we'll see changes as moves away from perhaps large coach trips to smaller coach trips, more individual travel, etc. And I think embracing that and finding the best way possible to move forward through that is going to be the answer to the particular challenge that we face right now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cindy. Tian, any last thoughts from you before we close?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the discussion. It was quite informative from my colleagues, and thank you for the opportunity. I think we need to acknowledge that responsible tourism, it's part of our white paper, but it's not part of our DNA yet. We need to start thinking in terms of the economic prosperity of our people in South Africa and utilizing tourism for that. Secondly, for social upliftment, where the industry already play a major role, and see how we can coordinate and expand that. And then thirdly, with environmental integrity. How do we look after the environment, but at the same time, make sure that opportunities are unleashed and unlocked for the local market and also for local operators? I think, and it's a little bit radical, but I think we need to take radical steps. And I think we need to abolish VAT on domestic travel. It's a 15% discount that will kick in immediately. It makes a huge difference for family travel. If mommy and daddy travel with 2 kids, it becomes an expensive exercise, and add 15% VAT on that. I think government can do that with immediate effect. It can be just zero rated if that's an easier option, a quicker option to do it. And then I want to invite the international buyers. Come to South Africa, come to Cape Town. The product is ready. The product is in a better shape than it was before. A lot of maintenance was carried out in the slack time that we had. New products are on the horizon being developed. We're just waiting for the doors to open, and come and shop and have your clients have a wonderful experience in Cape Town and in South Africa.
Fantastic. I don't think we need to go any further than that. That is a wonderful call to action to the world. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you for being part of Africa Travel Week. Goodbye.